Everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. We are in episode 141, and today we're going to have a look back again to the European Championships, Cluj-Napoca in Romania, and we're going to have a look at the minus 70 kilo division. We're not going straight to the final with this one. We're going to have a look at the semi-final between James Tuite and Timothy Bos. It was an absolute belter of a semi-final, really competitive match, some really good skills on show, and I think quite a lot to learn, quite a lot to take from it. So let's just jump straight into this, Richie. We can start chatting through. We've got this slow motion with some of the clips in it, and hopefully we can pull out some details and then come back and dissect it after.
Yeah, so as you said, cracker of a fight. A lot of people were waiting around looking for this one. So it starts off with Timmy closing right through on to James's front leg. And we see this is kind of a trend of the whole thing. So the hacks kick coming straight away, and the band, I think Timothy probably had that pegged. And we actually see that coming through most of the fight. We see here a little bit of squeezing going on. That's a character of Timothy's game, and James likes to hang around on the edge with that little bit of a push-pull. Using the front leg, he lands always quite narrow, so he's able to lift that leg always to launch you into one of his own kicks to set that trap. But nice, again, we see that trend of the band-aid use against the hacks kick. So we'll see that coming through time and time again, Adrian.
Yeah, and Timothy sometimes has to deal with changing legs to pull that off. He likes to take that shot even if he has to change legs to do it. In this case, stepping through the front leg quite nicely. James isn't always predictable. Like, it isn't always a turning kick off the front leg. And although he doesn't go to side kick habitually, the threat of it is always there, and we see it being a very effective for him once or twice as the match goes on. Here's a nice example. But it does mean that Timothy has sometimes got that option of stepping through to hands and getting through with the front hand. And there's moments in the match where he gets, quite effective use of the hands following that. But as you say, the pattern emerges where it's typically Timmy stalking from the centre and James looking to pick off the scores or use that push-pull on the edge.
Yeah, here we see one of the big traits of James is launching off the restart. So when the referee restarts the match, he's able to really capitalise most of the time. And like Timothy is looking to get the hands, and he gets there. But like, what stops you from getting the hands and being successful? It's a big threat on the opposite side, and that's what we see from James. He can kick you in the head at any stage. He's able to launch that leg and pull it up pretty quick. He's very slick on the reversals as well. That's something we look into a little bit later. He's able to reverse position when he needs it quite well. But he is very, very comfortable on that edge. And he almost has like that radar where if you come in past a certain range, he's going to lift his leg. And it can be to the body, it can be to the head. And he's quite effective with it and very successful most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of the things we're seeing from both fighters is it is interesting it's left v left. Like, there's a lot of other shots that we see them throw, particularly opening the back leg when they go in their kind of more normal left versus right kind of matches. And that's where we can often see both of them opening up fairly impressive back leg turning kicks in particular, and it brings a different kind of continuity. And it also, particularly for Timmy, gives him other options when it comes to hands on how he'll finish. So the fact that most of this match is spent, in that left versus left kind of standing, actually kind of limits the number of shots that they have quite a bit. But it does make some of the shots they take a little bit more natural. We can see here the risk that Timmy takes to create pressure on James as well, where he's having to step into range sometimes because the range that James holds with the body is quite long. I think even for the division, the leg length and his bearing, because he stands so tall a lot of the time, he can be deceptively long. The distance that you have to cover to get past his legs can actually be quite long.
Yeah, that's because of his short stance as well, obviously. So, like, it is deceptive, like you said. And when you do come into that range, like, you have to get through it, especially when you're winning, James is winning, that someone has to come through to get to that range to come to him. He's able to pick you off, and he'll put that leg in your face, usually with the hacks. Like, we actually have stats coming up here after this fight, but he throws a whopping 17 hacks kicks in this fight. Doesn't make contact with all of them, but that is a massive amount. Like, for that to be your main weapon, it's unheard of. Usually it's a side kick or something, maybe like a blitz or
something a little bit more mundane.
Like your hacks kick to be your main shot. Exactly. Like that it just shows the distance that he's able to create there, and it's through that deceptiveness of the stance, as well as like the versatility he has in the shots. There he is banging in 3 turning kicks to the body. Like, when do you ever see that? So
with
he is
one toe in
very,
the
very
ring.
versatile as well, which is a big factor. One toe in the ring, yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Now, hanging the edge of the ring does bring its, its dangers. I mean, he does concede 11 warnings over the course of the match. It's 3 deductions. And, in a tight match, as this has been, that could be the thing that costs you. And so he does have to have a good awareness of the scoreboard and how he stands to know whether or not he can afford that exit each time. So I think that's something just to keep in mind as you're looking at the styles here. Timmy Bos's style is a little bit more low risk in terms of the warnings. The risk that he's taking is that he needs to create pressure to shorten the distance, and every now and again he's probably going to get caught.
Yeah. See, the thing with James there as well, he does concede a lot of warnings, but Timothy actually got 2 fouls in this contest, which actually they end up cancelling each other out because there's 3 deductions on each side for each fighter at the end. So it cancels out, so it doesn't make a big difference. But yeah, that is a big factor. He wants to get the hands and push forward, and that's going to be a big part of his game. Like, usually you'd say if somebody is using like a turning kick, mostly like James does. Now, he does bang in 2 good solid side kicks as well, but he usually uses that kind of like toes up position with more of a Dalian Chegi, and he is able to still get a good score with that and create some nice angles. Because usually if someone uses that, you're going to say go through and burst through with hands, especially on the left. It's even easier. But he's just so slick with it. He's able to bang in and get the scores on the board with it, and still be able to be a threat just with that kick, because he can put that anywhere.
The joys of the summer have a fly buzzing around me here. But let's have a look at those stats in terms of the effectiveness of the shots thrown. So picking out this diagram, you've got Timmy on the left, James on the right, and the dark blue is the attempts and the light blue is the contacts. Richie, do you want to explain what we mean by contact?
Yeah, just a bit of context for this. So what we mean by contact is it actually made contact with the opponent. So not that it scored. This could even be hitting on the gloves or whatever. So if it hit fresh air, it didn't make contact. But if it hit the person's body, whether it's a score or not, we don't know. So we just track that anyway. But we see, like on the right here, for example, front leg carry. That's just lifting your front leg, whether it carries or not, into contact. Timothy kind of uses it a little bit more, whereas James uses it usually to set up another kick, usually a hacks or a dalio, or he's using it just to gain back a little bit of space if he's on the edge of the ring. So you can see James actually doesn't land or make contact with any of his front leg carries. They're just to kind of gain a bit of respect and to set up a potential shot. But he has a whopping, almost like up there around in the 20 marks, he has a 17 hacks kicks attempts. Now, he doesn't land them all, but when he does, they're big value scores. He has 2 big side kicks that land as well in this fight, and he has a couple of turning kicks that land nicely as well. So you can see he's getting a nice return on the shots he's using. He doesn't use many hands, where Timothy on the opposite side, then when we look on the left, he's punching a lot. Now, we're not counting every single punch here. It's just exchanges with hands. So that's what we're looking at here. He's quite successful in getting to contact with those. So if he's able to come out of that contact then as well and score kicks at the end of it, particularly with turning kicks, he's going to get a better return there. But James is able to nullify that for the most part. But overall, the big picture there, we see that the shots they're favouring more so, and you see that James is actually throwing more, and he's a little bit more successful in the overall value, because although Timothy makes contact with more shots, let's say, James is doing it with more high value shots, the likes of the high kicks, the head kicks, and the body kicks, getting more of a score return as well, obviously. So that's the tail of the tape.
Yeah, and it really is quite an interesting difference there. When you look at the overall then, just in terms of the stats, just an interesting thing to look at as well. 11 restarts over the match, and this is very standard. We normally say it's about 13 restarts on average across the 2 rounds, and you need to be ready to do something with that restart. That's kind of the thing there. And then looking at the number of warnings and fouls, you can see James with 4 warnings in round 1, 7 in round 2, and the round 2 increased ones as you get closer to the edge of the end of the match, and you can preserve your lead with fighting on the edge and taking those attempts at scoring shots on exits. Where Timmy, the big story there was of course the 2 fouls. So that was quite significant, and it certainly has an impact. But the overall number is staying consistent with what we've been seeing across a wide range of matches.
Yeah, them stats, even if you think the restart, you said the number 13.
Yeah.
I didn't count the start of the match in first and second round there, because
Yes.
they're obviously, they are restarts and they are parts
yeah.
you can take advantage of, but I didn't count them. So that still hits that 13 mark. So it is very interesting how these stats kind of stack up in the high level competition and things to be aware of. And speaking of that, like, restarts was a big factor of James's game. Now, Timothy did really well on a couple of restarts as well. Like, here is one, like that whopping over the top hacks kick. Every single time he's threatening with it, because Timothy has to get into the range, like we said earlier, to throw his hands, which was his big score. Whereas James has the advantage of being able to use the legs because they're longer, obviously, and get there a little bit earlier. And he's always threatening with that off the restart.
Yeah, and fundamentally the thing is, it's very hard to continue to put pressure on a person where your head is threatened, almost immediately. And he does it, like James does it often enough that that the threat to the head is pretty much there all of the time. So that's, it's definitely a very, very big deal. One of the things that Timothy had selected to kind of deal with the threat from James was the direct counter, or showing his willingness to counter that front leg directly. And I think he picked some, whether stepping through with the front hand, going direct to hands, or very, very often attempting the Band-Aid oleo. It does put a little bit of manners on someone as well, to know that, hey, if I don't throw this tidily, I'm going to be in trouble. And knowing that the threat of the Band-Aid is always there from Timothy means that when James picks up that front leg and looks to push out, he has to respect the threat of it.
Yeah, no, he didn't get a great return. There was one of them that was close to landing. I don't know if it scored or not, but there was one of them that was pretty close. I think it was the very end of round one, actually, and that actually saw out the end of the round. But as you said, it's a mindset thing. It just makes the other person more aware that you can kind of just do what you want here, that I will throw that big shot and there's a potential of you getting hurt. So as you said, puts manners on the other person. But James does a really good job of like that springboard effect that we always talk about, of having a close short stance so you're able to lift his leg really quick again after dropping it. And I think that does help him as well in these exchanges, particularly on the Band-Aid, because for a split second after spinning, you are kind of in a transition phase of getting back to your stance and back to your original position with balance. And the fact that James is able to lift that leg pretty quick is a big advantage for him. So that's something as well to be aware of. Even the way he does it here, just lift up again, that threat to the head.
Yeah, and I think his ability to vary the threat as he pushes and pulls around. So sometimes it's that front leg turning kick, sometimes a side kick, and very often that hacks, that it's enough variation to make it very, very difficult to, have a very clear plan about what you want to do. But his game plan, especially once he has the lead, definitely invites the other person to come forward, but you're stepping into danger zone. And, it really is a case of, he doesn't need to get it right every time, but if his opponent gets it wrong once, often the reward is fairly huge for James in terms of that head kick.
Yeah, and he does like a push-pull action as well to kind of lure people in. He'll kind of come in with that front leg carry that we've seen the stats were high on, and he'll draw you in. This was a great exchange here in the corner. But he'll draw you in with that, and then hoping that you'll come into that space where he has that automatic radar that sets off the alarm bells that he's going to whack that shot up towards your head if you come into that space. So he does that to lure people in as well. So although you want to take the space he gives you, like, there is a big threat there, so it's a big factor of his game as well. And I think that was one of the main things that got him away with, apart from the fouls, obviously, that gets him away with kind of hanging around the edge, because he's able to pick a head kick here and there on occasion from that position really well.
Yeah, and there's a few big scores, I think, that kind of settled the match overall, and the outcome, of course, James taking this. And, there's maybe a less clear turning kick to the head coming up, but the clear side kick to the body, and a relatively clear, at least it was given on the scoreboard, hacks within round one really allowed James to overcome the couple of good exchanges that Timmy had in terms of putting pressure on with hands, and a couple of the direct counters to go into the round two with a lead. And again, one more clear kick in the second round, and then really Timmy had to chase, and that's a comfortable place for James to be.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, that was the main thing for him. Like the rule set is important here as well. Like James is getting big value scores based on the scoring criteria for ITF.
Yeah.
Like Timothy is pushing forward, he's getting in there with the hands, but it's a scoring criteria that wins here. Like, you know what I mean? 3 points for a head kick, and it's so clear on all four cards as well if you can get that most of the time, especially with a turning kick. You know, like he scores here. I don't know if that lands, but it was a nice shot, a good attempt. And
Mm.
they're the ones that are going to get you the value. You know, even in the corner here, banging in those three. Like you think that in a corner, not easy for all judges to see, but he's able to just make the clarity of them scores, which that's what it's all about, getting the value on the scoreboard.
I think when we talk about the hands, you can see where like there's probably good value for Timothy on, we say, this exchange where he's
Yeah.
managed to catch James not flat-footed exactly, but on one leg, and there's going to be a couple of scores off that exchange in his favour. But then many of the exchanges to hands happen in this way where James is already on the edge and he's able to just attempt a counter shot on exit, and yeah, he's penalised. He takes the warning, but it's stopping Timothy from doing two things. Number one, getting a good value on the initial contact with hands, and number two, he's not getting the follow-up scores with the legs because he hasn't got that initial contact far enough into the ring to allow it to develop. So this one of the challenges of fighting someone who wants to spar on the edge of the ring is you need to do a lot of work with the legs first, or get yourself into the match to where maybe you have a lead so that they have to step off the edge to you, and that'll let you kind of build the scores. Whereas if they're hugging the edge of the ring, you really have to be very patient to build up the warnings and do all of the work to get the scores back in your favour, because it's so difficult to actually build a lead with the hands when the person is standing on the edge.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of standing on the edge, I think James had 3 occasions where he had lovely reversals as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have any clips of that, but like that is worth looking at as well, especially the last one in the end of round 2. He dips the head and kind of swings around the back of his opponent. Lovely escapes from the edges. And
Yeah.
I think this is actually, is this it? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
one. So the way he does that and comes back around with the dolly to the body, great little reversal. So he's able to escape, and he's quite crafty there in the corner as well. The one in the far corner was my favorite by far, but he did it 3 or 4 times in this fight. Got good ring position as a result, and towards the end of the match, it was a big difference as well. Gave him a bit of pressure release too, because he wasn't in the corner anymore, which made a big difference when he's winning on the scoreboard.
Absolutely. And of course, the way that had developed, he knew Timmy needed the hands to claw his way back in the scoreboard, which meant it's a little bit easier to commit to putting your head in that vulnerable position when you know your opponent needs hands. Where, if the threat had been more consistently with the legs on the edge, maybe it gets a little bit scarier to go under in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that it, Adrian? That everything that we hit?
I think that covers everything we wanted to talk about on this match. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, as you said, cracker of a match. I hope you guys enjoyed the analysis and the stats. That's something new that we've tried. So let us know if you like it, and maybe we'll keep it going in the future as well. And let us know if there's any fights that you want to hit us up with going forward from the Euros, because still plenty to get through, and we're excited to get into those and see what some of the things that people are doing at the top of Europe.
Fantastic. We'll see you next Friday.
See you in the next one.